In the glittering world of stage lights and the silver screen stars were once cherished by the public like immortal gods. They conquered millions of hearts with extraordinary talent, from iconic roles to vast entertainment empires. But behind that shimmering shell lies a hidden side few ever see. From a cold reality TV queen snapping, "Get your ass up and work at people struggling just to survive," to Hollywood's #1 superstar snarling through leaked audio, firing an entire crew over a single minor mistake. And even a legendary acting genius who once rejected an Oscar and called fans a bunch of stupid sheep. Don't look away, because this truth will force you to see your idols through a completely different lens. Watch until the end to find out who made all of Hollywood fall into a terrified silence because of their cruelty. 1. Tom Cruise. The perfect superstar and the hidden fury. Tom Cruise entered cinematic history as an undefeated icon. A smile so bright it seemed never to fade, the confident gaze of a man who always believed he could run faster, fly higher, and survive any fall. From Top Gun with the flight jacket and the proud head turned to Mission Impossible, where he clung to airplanes and sprinted across speeding trains, Tom became the embodiment of speed and devotion. Fans did not merely watch his films, they worshipped him. For many people, Tom Cruise did not age, did not tire, did not make mistakes, but blinding glory often casts an extremely long shadow. Away from the screen, stories about Tom's cold demeanor began to surface more and more frequently. At premieres, some fans recalled being denied a selfie with a firm shake of the head, followed by an irritated look as if their admiration were an intrusion. Once, when approached by a prankster, Tom dropped a short cutting line. "You're a jerk. No violence. No noise, but enough to turn the meeting into a scar in the other person's memory." In 2020, the incident in East Grinstead made that image crack even more visibly. A helicopter stunt for Mission Impossible caused fear among local residents, the roaring engines circling above their heads. For fans watching from afar, excitement gave way to unease. Tom, the man who always claimed to control every risk, was questioned for the first time. Was that devotion crossing the line of respect? Then came the infamous leaked audio, where Tom's voice snarled at the crew over COVID rule violations. "If I see you do it again, you're fucking gone." That line was not just an outburst of anger, it was the moment the perfect shell was stripped away. The hero was no longer smiling. What remained was a man obsessed with flawless standards, ready to crush anyone who shook the order he had built. Many believe Scientology played a major role in that isolation. A belief system that glorifies absolute control where weakness is treated as failure. Tom was not allowed to be wrong, not allowed to be tired, not allowed to be ordinary. And when the entire world viewed him as an action saint, the pressure only grew heavier. He had to maintain perfection, not only for fans, but for the faith he followed. The consequences did not arrive overnight, they accumulated. The Oprah couch jump, once seen as a lovable moment of romantic excitement, gradually became a symbol of losing control in public. A portion of loyal fans began to doubt. They still watched Tom's movies, still admired the stunts, but their belief was no longer complete. And then amid all that brilliance, Tom appeared increasingly alone. He flew higher than anyone else, but there were very few people sharing that sky. Relentless perfectionism pushed us away, turning those who once loved him into distant spectators, watching with mixed feelings of admiration and detachment. Tom Cruise made the world believe in the magic of action cinema, and that same magic also locked him inside a golden cage called perfection. As Tom's story closes in self-created solitude, our gaze shifts to another icon, one who reigns on social media, where the distance between a star and us seems closer while remaining just as fragile. 2. Kim Kardashian, the distant queen, and us. Kim Kardashian once appeared as a very ordinary girl in a glamorous world. With no background in cinema and no gifted singing voice, Kim stepped into the spotlight through reality TV, allowing the world to see her private life. From there, she built an empire, hundreds of millions of followers, Skims becoming a billion-dollar brand, and Kim crowned as the queen of social media. For many people, she stood as living proof of the modern American dream, showing that with enough intelligence and persistence, attention could be turned into power. Kim's appeal lay in a sense of closeness. Fans believed they understood. Her believed Kim was one of us, only luckier and bolder. They followed every episode, every Instagram story, every step on the red carpet. Kim did not just sell products, she sold the feeling of connection. And right there, the cracks began to form. During the pandemic, when millions lost their jobs and struggled to pay rent, Kim delivered a line that stunned the world.
I have the best advice for women in business. Get your fucking ass up and work.
Get your ass up and work. For Kim, it might have been a business tip. For viewers everywhere, it landed like an invisible slap. The words came from a billionaire standing far removed from the reality of exhausted people. In that instant, the glow turned cold. More stories followed. At major events like the Met Gala, Kim faced criticism for ignoring fans who had lined up early, walking past them with an arrogant pose, eyes never looking back. Some said she treated fans like background props, a required part of the fame machine rather than human beings. Rumors about mistreating staff, low pay, and strict demands from her team sharpened that image even further. The pressure from the Kardashian family was never light. Constant drama cameras, always rolling, personal image controlled down to every detail. Kim lived in a continuous state of defense where every mistake could be magnified worldwide. When someone spends too long protecting an image, it becomes easy to forget the feelings of those around them. The backlash came fast and hard. Follower counts dipped for a time, debates erupted, lawsuits from staff and former employees resurfaced. Kim remained wealthy and famous, but the connection had never felt more fragile. Among millions of followers, she looked strangely alone. The tragedy of Kim Kardashian does not lie in money or fame, it lies in distance. She once symbolized the idea that anyone can rise, and that very success pushed her away from her roots. From that distance, we move into another chapter where anger does not erupt on social media, but explodes into violence, triggering one of the loudest collapses in Hollywood history. 3. Will Smith, the perfect smile and the shattering moment. On the Oscars stage in 2022, the world held its breath. Not because of a major award, but because of a moment no one was prepared to witness. It was reported that Chris Rock, while presenting the Best Documentary Feature Award, made an unscripted joke about Will Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith. He said, "In essence, Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane. 2 can't wait to see it," referencing the film where Demi Moore shaved her head. The joke targeted Jada's short hair, which was due to alopecia, a medical condition Jada had openly shared and was deeply sensitive about. Jada was seated in the audience, her face clearly displeased. Will Smith initially laughed along with the crowd. Then seconds later, he stood up, walked onto the stage, and slapped Chris Rock hard across the face. Will returned to his seat and shouted twice, "Keep my wife's name out, your fuck mouth." Chris Rock responded only with, "Wow, dude." It was a G.I. Jane joke, then continued presenting the award as if nothing had happened, though he was visibly shaken. That moment was not just a slap. It was the eruption of decades of pressure to maintain a perfect image that Will had placed on his own shoulders. Born from a desire to protect his wife, it unintentionally exposed the inner darkness he had hidden. For years, a man who once smiled brightly on screen, who made the whole world laugh, now letting anger wash everything away. Will Smith did not grow up in Hollywood glamour. He started on the streets of Philadelphia, a young rapper with a radiant smile and endless energy. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air turned him into a symbol of joy and optimism. Then, Independence Day, Men in Black, The Pursuit of Happiness. Each film reinforced the Will Smith image, kind, humorous, always overcoming adversity with a smile. He became a friend to millions of viewers, living proof that the American dream was real. Behind that smile, there was crushing pressure. Always be cheerful. Always be positive. Always be the good guy in the public eye. Rumors gradually surfaced. Will mistreating staff on set, rudely rejecting fans who got too close, or simply losing patience with people around him. The strain of maintaining a perfect image in an overwhelmingly public life pushed him closer to losing control. Every time he faced the camera, he had to smile, had to look happy, had to prove he was good guy Will Smith. Deep inside remained the boy who never escaped the psychological scars of a childhood marked by poverty and domestic violence. After the Oscar slap, Will was banned from attending the Academy Awards. For 10 years, major contracts were frozen, projects placed under review. The star, once seen as a positive symbol, became the center of criticism. Applause turned into heavy silence. Will won an Oscar that same night, and that victory was completely overshadowed by an unforgettable mistake. Even more frightening was the isolation. For the first time in his career, he entered a prolonged period of loneliness. Once the cheerful Prince of Bel-Air who made the world laugh with witty lines, he now faced himself in the dark. Will Smith teaches a painful lesson. A perfect smile often hides the deepest cracks. When those cracks break open, they do not only hurt others, they also shatter the one who carries them. Even after such a serious mistake, many still hope he can find himself again, not the perfect Will Smith of the public, but the real Will Smith. With scars and tears, a human being allowed to fail, allowed to learn how to apologize, and allowed to heal. Because if there is one thing Hollywood repeatedly forgets, it is this: no one can live under the spotlight forever without getting burned. And if someone who once brought joy to millions can heal, then there may still be hope for all of us. 4. James Corden, when the one who makes us laugh no longer knows how to laugh with anyone. James Corden was once the very definition of likable. A British guy with a round, cheerful smile, a witty voice, and a talent for making anyone sitting next to him feel at ease. From British theater stages to The Late Late Show in the United States, James carried the energy of a close friend, the kind of person audiences believed was just as kind in real life as he appeared on television. Carpool karaoke became the peak of that image. James sat in a car singing, chatting, breaking down every barrier between celebrities and ordinary people. He made major artists feel approachable and convinced audiences that laughter could connect everyone. In the public eye, James Corden was not someone standing above others. He was the person sitting beside you, turning on the radio, laughing out loud. In 2022, that picture cracked badly. Balthazar Restaurant in New York publicly banned James Corden over rude behavior toward waiters. The restaurant owner described shouting fits and biting remarks that left staff in tears. The host who once made America laugh now appeared in a story with no laughter at all. James later apologized, but the scratch was already deeply engraved. More accusations began to surface. Behind the scenes, James was described as having diva behavior, being irritable, with crews cold toward technical staff. Fans recalled being bluntly rejected when asking for photos, a complete contrast to the friendly image on TV. The gap between James on screen and James in real life grew increasingly visible. Pressure was part of the cause. Moving from the UK to the US was not just a change of workplace, it meant a total cultural shift. James carried ratings, expectations, and the fear of being replaced in a ruthless market. Success came quickly, and along with it, an inflated ego. When laughter becomes a product, the human being behind it is easily forgotten. The backlash on social media was far harsher than James expected. Old stories resurfaced, the image of everyone's friend collapsed. The Late Late Show ended earlier than planned, leaving a lingering sense of incompleteness. James remained famous, but he was no longer loved in the same way. The laughter on stage now echoed in an emptier space. As that story closes in isolation, we move on to another chapter 1, where anger is not limited to words, but turns into violence, leaving an unerasable scar in Hollywood history. 5. Joan Crawford, when the dream of escaping poverty turns into an obsession with power. Joan Crawford was not born into the spotlight. She began life under the name Lucille LeSueur, a poor girl in Kansas City who scrubbed restaurant floors and worked relentlessly for every small coin. In those days, she dreamed of stage lights, glamorous gowns, and a life where no one could ever look down on her again. That dream came true. Joan Crawford became an icon of Hollywood's golden age, perfectly styled curls, blazing red lips, sharp and mesmerizing eyes. She won an Oscar for Mildred Pierce in 1945, becoming the queen of the silver screen with an image of flawless glamour. The public admired her studios competed to cast her, and the name Joan Crawford became synonymous with perfection, power, and timeless beauty. Joan Crawford did not merely succeed, she conquered. The public loved her not only for her talent, but for her story, someone who once struggled just like them, now standing at the top through sheer willpower. Joan needed that love. She lived on admiring gazes, on the validation that all those harsh years had been worth it. The higher she climbed, the more Joan Crawford feared falling. That fear slowly turned into a wall. She began treating waiters, backstage staff, drivers, and even crews as threats, as inferiors she herself had once been. Shouting contemptuous looks became so frequent they were considered normal in Hollywood. For Joan, power was not only protection, it was proof that she was no longer the poor girl she used to be. On set, Joan often yelled at waiters when coffee was not the right temperature, scolded crews over lighting that was not glamorous enough, treating them as servants unworthy of standing near her. With fans, she was even colder. When someone approached for an autograph, she often looked at them with disdain, refused outright, treating praise as a nuisance, something that disturbed the high-class life she had achieved. Everything grew darker when her adopted daughter, Christina Crawford, released the memoir, Mommy Dearest. The pages described physical and psychological abuse, a mother whose harshness bordered on cruelty. Arguments remain about its accuracy, but the book etched the image of a tyrannical Joan Crawford, someone who used authority to control those around her. For the public, it was a shock, the screen queen, as a source of pain within her own home. At the root of it all lay fear of losing status, fear of being forgotten, fear of returning to Lucille, the floor-scrubbing girl no one remembered. Near the end of her life, as her health declined, Joan Crawford died in loneliness in 1977. Only a few staff members and helpers were by her side, no children, no close friends, not even the crowds that once cheered her name. She had dreamed of unconditional love from the public, of sincere admiration without demands. Joan herself pushed everyone away, building walls of arrogance with her own hands. Joan Crawford represents the tragedy of a woman who rose from the bottom of society to the peak through talent and iron will, only to lose herself along the way. She became a queen and also a prisoner of her own throne. 6. Marlon Brando, the rebellious genius and the battle with himself. In 1973, at the Academy Awards, Marlon Brando did not appear. Instead, a Native American woman named Sachin Littlefeather walked onto the stage, refused the Oscar on his behalf, and delivered a statement protesting Hollywood's treatment of indigenous people. That moment was not only a political act, it was Brando's declaration of war against the entire system that had elevated him against cruise fans, and even those who worshipped him as a god of acting. He viewed all of them, from directors and supporting actors to backstage workers and audiences, as sheep-foolish followers led by fake glamour. Marlon Brando was never a conventional star. He was a true, rebellious genius. With Vito Corleone in The Godfather and Terry Malloy in On the Waterfront, he completely transformed screen acting, raw, internal, profoundly deep. That rebellion also became a double-edged blade. On the set of Guys and Dolls, Brando terrorized the crew with contemptuous behavior, frequently arriving late, demanding script changes, treating everyone around him as tools meant to serve his talent. He once called his co-star Frank Sinatra a petty jerk, and freely mocked many other stars with cutting remarks. With fans, Brando showed almost no patience. He refused interaction, viewing admiration as a symptom of herd mentality that he despised. The roots of that hostility lay deep in a difficult childhood in Nebraska, with an alcoholic father and an unstable mother, leaving Brando with an intense aversion to all forms of constraint, including the fame that came later. He saw celebrity as a prison, and his form of resistance was self-isolation. In his later years, he lived reclusively, cutting himself off from the public and even former friends. When he died in 2004, Marlon Brando passed away in loneliness, leaving behind recordings filled with torment, monologues of regret and remorse. He had once stood as a symbol of freedom of defiance, of an actor brave enough to live honestly with his emotions. That very contempt led him astray forever. Marlon Brando hated us, hated those who lifted him to the peak with love and movie tickets. Somewhere deep inside, what he truly hated may have been his own loss, the loss of a man who once dreamed, once felt sincerely only to be swallowed by his talent and his pain. He remains painful proof that rebellion is not always freedom. Sometimes it is just another way to imprison oneself. 7. Bette Davis, the Queen of the Gays. Guarding the throne with thorns. Bette Davis stepped onto the screen with eyes that seemed to speak a weapon powerful enough to silence all of Hollywood. All About Eve turned her into a symbol of defiance, a queen who asked no one for permission to exist. Classic audiences adored Bette obsessively because of a sharp, striking personality that stood in complete contrast to the formulaic actresses of her era. On screen, Bette Davis became the voice of women who were dismissed, intelligent, strong, independent, and ready to strike back. Off-screen, once the lights went out, that very image slowly turned into a wall separating her from the public, the people who had worshipped her through handwritten letters, autographs, and hours of standing in line just for a single smile. At book signings and public events, Bette could be cold to the point of cruelty. When fans approached with trembling eyes, she often responded with a quick glance and a curt remark, sometimes edged with sarcasm. Fan mail, the lifeblood of Golden Age stardom, appeared to her as an annoying obligation. In Bette's world, life was a battlefield, and anyone stepping into her territory had to accept brutal rules. In later memoirs and interviews, Bette openly referred to fans as simple-minded people who did not understand art and lacked the capacity to judge her true value. She did not want to sign autographs, take photos, or spend time with admirers she considered an ordinary crowd. "I don't live on affection," she once said, half joking, half serious. Behind the scenes, matters were no better. She shouted at directors over camera angles that were not dramatic enough, scolded makeup artists when powder was uneven, berated crews over the smallest noise that disrupted a take. These words were not mere critiques from a perfectionist actress. They carried deep contempt, as though those around her were unworthy of standing near her talent. That tyrannical presence frightened people, pushed them away, and gradually left her isolated in the very world she ruled. Bette's feuds with colleagues further carved the image of an unapproachable queen. Verbal clashes, icy stares, and ruthless competition were woven by the press into legend. She looked at directors, makeup artists, lighting crews as if they were enemies trying to sabotage the perfection she pursued her entire life. For Bette, everything had to be absolute: facial lines, razor-sharp voice resonating at the precise rhythm, no one allowed to make mistakes. Personal pain played a major role in shaping that armor of arrogance. 4 failed marriages, family losses, illnesses of old age all pushed Bette to build protective walls. Arrogance was not her nature. It was a shield against further harm. She feared being belittled, being forgotten, feared returning to anonymity she had fought her entire life to escape. The price was loneliness. Near the end of her life, with failing health and a shrinking circle of friends, Bette Davis sat alone in a large house, looking back with regret at the years she had spent pushing everyone away. The sharp eyes that once conquered the screen now turned inward, facing her own private darkness. She died in 1989, leaving behind a monumental legacy and lingering sorrow, a colossal talent unable to share pain with anyone, ultimately consumed by that pain. Bette Davis stands as painful proof that immense talent often comes with wounds that cannot be healed. She made Hollywood tremble and admire her, and she also drove herself into permanent isolation. As Bette's story closes, the spotlight shifts to another warrior, a man carrying both strength and rage on his shoulders, raising the question, what happens when masculinity itself becomes an unbearable pressure? 8. Russell Crowe, the warrior who cannot leave the battlefield. Russell Crowe entered public memory as an undefeated general. Gladiator painted him in sweat, mud, and raw authenticity, convincing audiences that masculinity meant hardness, strength, readiness to strike. Those roles built a revered image, the man who never retreats. Fans loved Crowe because he did not play heroes. He was the hero. In real life, once the helmet came off, the anger refused to settle. In 2005, at the Mercer Hotel in New York, Russell Crowe threw a telephone directly at a hotel clerk because he could not reach his wife. That act led to his arrest and court appearance, turning him into a symbol of uncontrolled rage, far removed from the brave warrior image that had earned him an Oscar in 2001. Earlier signs had already appeared, forming a larger picture, snapping at staff brusque behavior, at events visible irritation in front of cameras when disturbed. He was rude to reporters at a Dublin premiere, lashed out at questions he deemed stupid, and repeatedly shouted at service workers when standards fell short. Russell Crowe was not always aggressive. He grew up in a poor family in Australia where a harsh life taught him to fight for survival. Fame arrived through powerful roles, shaping him into an icon of the real man, tall, deep-voiced eyes burning with intensity. Carrying such a massive image while his inner self remained a wounded child turned him into a monster he sometimes failed to recognize. Anger often hides deep pain, and Russell Crowe stands as vivid proof of that truth. Fortunately, Russell Crowe was not stubborn to the end. After the Mercer incident, he publicly apologized, admitted his actions were wrong, and showed genuine remorse. That apology revealed an ability to reflect a remaining sense of humanity that knew when to stop before crossing too far. Even so, his image eroded. Crowe's career did not collapse, but it cooled. He continued working and taking roles while fear lingered in the audience's eyes. He was no longer seen as the undefeated general, but as a man wrestling with himself. Loneliness became inevitable, not because of a lack of people around him, but because no one dared step into the blast zone. Toward the end of the road, Crowe began speaking about responsibility and learning how to pause. Lessons learned late often come with regret. His story reminds us that behind a powerful exterior are wounds few ever see. 9. Mel Gibson, the Braveheart hero and poisonous words. In 2010, audio recordings suddenly spread across the world, sending shockwaves through Hollywood. On a Malibu highway in a state of drunkenness, Mel unleashed anti-Semitic rants in front of police officers, raw, hateful, and leaving the public stunned. This was not a role. There was no music to prop it up, no lighting to soften the edges. There was only a man losing control and a mask slipping off under millions of eyes. Fans, people who once found inspiration and faith in him, were abruptly forced to face a bitter question. Did the hero they admired truly hold contempt for the most basic values of the community? The revelations that followed cut even deeper. Audio tapes abuse allegations, hostile language rippled outward like aftershocks, dragging heavy disappointment along with them.
Another.
Give me a bat in the side of the head. How about that?
A third.
You're a using whore.
And now a fourth. Nearly 20 minutes of hate-filled rants. Mel Gibson allegedly threatening his ex-girlfriend Oksana Grigorieva during phone calls she apparently recorded and Radar Online released. The latest, a demand for sex, coupled with another threat.
For many viewers, Mel did more than insult one group of people. He shattered the invisible bond between artist and audience. "I was wrong," Mel said in his belated apologies. An apology that arrives after the storm often has a long, exhausting walk before it can reach the shore. Analyzing the causes is not about excusing, but about understanding. Alcohol addiction and personal trauma from a difficult childhood in Australia can be seen as the spark. Religious pressure and fiercely held beliefs pushed to extremes became the wind. Unhealed personal wounds and inner turmoil formed a pile of dry wood waiting to ignite. When everything converged, an explosion was hard to avoid. Mel once told stories of redemption and faith. The irony is that he lacked the steadiness to live by the very lessons he preached. The consequences came quickly and, without mercy, Hollywood shut its doors. Major agencies stepped away. The name Mel Gibson turned into a liability. He was blacklisted not by an official sentence, but by prolonged silence, the harshest punishment for someone who lives under the lights. Projects evaporated. Invitations grew scarce. A man who once stood at the summit now had to circle around the wings, learning how to survive in the shadows. And in those shadows, Mel began a different journey, a journey of atonement. No noise, no grand declarations. Small roles, cautious appearances. Some viewers turned away forever. Others chose conditional forgiveness. The uncomfortable truth remains: talent can return. Trust is fragile. Mel once inspired millions with stories of freedom. Now his freedom is a second chance, difficult, slow, and necessary. The tragedy of Mel Gibson reminds us that words can be the most dangerous weapon a person carries, and that bravery on screen does not equal bravery in real life. 10. Bruce Willis, Die Hard and the Silence at the End of Life. Bruce Willis never needed a cape. Die Hard turned him into a blue-collar hero, an ordinary man with an indestructible punch and a half-serious, half-playful smile. In the 80s and 90s, Bruce was America's companion, imperfect, unpolished, always ready to poke fun at himself. Fans loved him for that sense of closeness, as if Bruce could step out of the screen, sit beside them, tell a joke, then rush headfirst back into trouble. As the spotlight stretched on exhaustion, followed. Promotional interviews slowly became awkward. Bruce appeared uncooperative, curt, with journalists offering brief answers, sometimes cold. On-set stories of discomfort spread. Kevin Smith once spoke of tense working days where communication faltered and smiles became rare. Fans grew confused. How did the once easygoing hero become so distant? At that time, the public saw only the surface. Few knew that behind the irritability lay the pressure of non-stop filming a machine that allowed no slowing down. Deeper still were the quiet signals of illness. Aphasia, diagnosed late, was steadily eroding his language abilities, turning communication into a burden. When words betray you, every interview becomes a battle. Every day on set turns into a test. In 2022, Bruce Willis revealed his condition, and the world responded with a wave of collective sorrow. From that moment, behaviors once labeled rude took on a different color under new light. Not contempt, but helplessness. Not disregard for fans, but fear of failing to meet expectations. "I'm fine," Bruce often said. The truth was that his body had begun to whisper then, to speak loudly that it was time to stop. In the end, illness and stress forced Bruce to step away from acting abruptly. The news came through his family, rather than from him directly, opening a rare wave of empathy. The public for the first time looked back at those uncomfortable moments with gentleness. Old interviews were rewatched with deeper understanding. Fans sent messages of gratitude, along with wishes for peace. Bruce Willis is a sad story about the cost of being a hero for too long. He brought joy to generations through action. Comedies made us laugh and hold our breath at the same time. We still love him, even as he chose silence to protect himself, even as he no longer appears on screen. Bruce reminds us that a true hero is not someone who is unbeatable, but someone who dares to face their own vulnerability. And perhaps within that silence, he found a peace the flash of cameras could never offer. 10 names, 10 people once loved, idolized, and placed on pedestals we ourselves built. They stood before endless applause, heard crowds chanting their names like a declaration. You are special. Fame carries a cruel side. It does not only magnify talent, it enlarges every crack within a person. A careless remark, an uncontrolled burst of anger, a moment of disregard for the person in front of them. And the love of the public, which seems limitless, can be withdrawn faster than stage lights fade. Some on this list truly held contempt for their fans. Some were simply exhausted, lost or ill. Some never learned how to love others because they were never loved properly themselves. The common thread is this: when the gap between star and human being grows too wide, collapse becomes unavoidable. We once thought they hated us. At certain moments that may have been true. Or perhaps they were hating the version of themselves that fame forced them to become. If you have ever felt disappointed discovering an idol was not who you imagined, if you have wondered why famous people so easily lose their kindness, or if you see in these stories something deeply human, fragile, and familiar, leave a comment. Like to support content that digs into the hidden side of fame. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to keep telling stories with us that are not glamorous but honest, because in the end, the lights will go out. Fame will fade. What remains is the human being and the way they treated the people who loved them most. See you in the next story.